Junior year. He was 17, I was 15. Football had been the gravitational center of our household. Everything orbited his games, his practices, his scholarship offers. He was the star. Then, one random afternoon, after an argument with his coach about playing time, Mark quit the team. Just walked out mid-season. Said he was focusing on his future. Coming from a 17-year-old who'd focused on nothing but football his entire life. Turns out his future involved sleeping until noon, playing video games all night, and doing nothing productive. He spent the rest of junior year and all of senior year basically living in the basement, a nocturnal creature. My parents kept telling relatives he was taking a break before college scouts called. Nobody called. Not a single school. Not even community college recruiters. Meanwhile, I was actually doing fine. Sophomore year, I joined the music club, got a part-time job at Joey's Pizza. I tried to stay out of the way while Mark drifted, acting like the world owed him something. But he couldn't leave me alone, especially now that he had nothing going on. He started messing with my things constantly. He'd go into my room, take things, hide them, sometimes break them for fun. The worst was the guitar I'd saved a whole year to buy. I came home one day to find it snapped in 2 pieces on the floor. Mark claimed he accidentally bumped it. An accident, sure. Mom told me I should have put it somewhere safer. I completely lost it. First and only time I actually shoved him. He shoved me back. We started yelling. Dad broke it up. And guess who got grounded? Me. Because Mark said I started it, even throwing in some fake tears. I remember thinking, this guy could literally rob a bank, and somehow it would be my fault for not stopping him. After that, I started working extra hours at the pizza place. Partly for college money, partly because every hour there was an hour I didn't have to spend at home. My boss, Frank, an ex-military guy, liked that I showed up and worked hard. I'd often volunteer for closing shifts, any excuse to be somewhere else. At home, everything still revolved around Mark. Even though he wasn't doing anything, even though he'd thrown away his one talent, my parents still acted like big opportunities would magically appear. The reality was, he barely graduated. His GPA was garbage. No sports teams wanted him. He had no plan, no backup, no clue. The night of Mark's graduation party was when things truly exploded. Mom and Dad threw a huge backyard bash. Mark strutted around, accepting congratulations for an achievement that should have been the bare minimum. Someone asked about his college plans, and he said he was keeping his options open, like he was in high demand. Later, I overheard him telling a group that I'd probably be stuck living at home forever. That was rich, coming from the guy with no job, no college acceptances, and no plan beyond his next gaming session. I didn't say anything then, but I remember thinking, one day this golden boy fantasy is going to blow up in their faces, and it did. I moved out the same week I graduated high school. Packed everything into my car and drove 3 hours to the University of Michigan, not looking back. Mom cried like I was abandoning the family by going to college. Dad said, "Don't forget where you came from," which was hilarious from the guy who couldn't name a single one of my classes or hobbies because he was too busy obsessing over Mark's football stats. Mark didn't even bother to see me off. He was still asleep when I left. Typical. College felt like a freedom I'd never experienced. No one yelling, no one breaking my stuff, no parents acting like I was invisible. I worked, studied, got a job at the library, joined the music club, made actual friends. For the first time, I could walk around without constantly bracing for someone to mess with me. Meanwhile, back home, Mark's life crumbled. The big football star? That dream died fast. He signed up for community college classes, but barely showed up, quit after 1 semester, claiming school wasn't for him. What he was really doing was sleeping until noon, playing Xbox all night, and mooching off Mom and Dad. They still acted like he was special. He just needs time, Mom would tell relatives. He's keeping his options open, Dad would say. Like Mark was some free agent athlete weighing offers, not an unemployed 20-year-old living rent-free. I stayed out of it as much as possible. I had my own life to build. But every time I went home for holidays, Mark found a way to start something. The worst was Christmas my sophomore year. I brought my girlfriend, Sarah, home. I'd warned her about Mark, but she didn't truly understand until she witnessed him. We were in the living room, having a normal conversation, when out of nowhere Mark goes, "Hey, Sarah, did Ethan tell you he used to cry every time he lost at Mario Kart?" Everyone laughed. Then he added, "Don't get him too excited tonight. He might cry again." Sarah looked mortified. I was furious. And Mom told me to stop being so sensitive when I asked Mark to knock it off. That was the last time Sarah came home with me. Can't blame her. Chloe wasn't home much either during those years. When she turned 18, she started college in Boston. I think she saw how toxic things were and decided distance was the only solution. She skipped some holidays. When Mom complained, Chloe just said she was too busy with school. Mark accused her of betraying the family, saying Chloe thought she was too good for them now. Funny thing was, Chloe actually stayed in touch with me far more than she did with our parents. She'd call regularly to talk about classes, friends, her boyfriend, Ben. We actually built a real relationship once we were both out of that house. By my junior year, Mark was 22 and still living at home. No job, no education, no plan. He worked at a car wash for 2 months, quit because the boss was a jerk. Tried landscaping, quit because it was too hot. Every time he quit, Mom made excuses. He just hasn't found the right fit yet, she'd say, as if he were a delicate flower instead of a grown adult who needed to get his act together. Dad started pressuring me about not visiting home enough. Said the family was drifting apart. I told him maybe if things at home weren't constantly revolving around Mark and his problems, people would actually want to be there. He didn't appreciate that answer. The summer before my senior year, I went home for a few weeks to work a temp job and save money. I figured I could tolerate it for a short stretch. I was wrong. One night at dinner, Mark started making comments about how I thought I was better than everyone just because I was in college. I tried ignoring him, but he wouldn't let up. He kept poking, saying my degree would be useless, that I'd end up working at a gas station. Finally, I snapped. At least I won't be living in Mom and Dad's basement at 23 with no job and no clue what I'm doing with my life. Dead silence. Dad told me to apologize. I laughed and said no, because I wasn't wrong. Mark got mad, picked up a dinner roll, and threw it at my head like we were 5 years old. I stood up, walked out, and drove back to campus the next morning, even though classes hadn't started. That was the last time I stayed at my parents' house for longer than a single weekend. After that, holidays were hit or miss. Sometimes I showed up for a quick visit. Sometimes I didn't bother. Chloe was even more distant. Mom kept saying the family was falling apart. I privately thought maybe it was just finally falling into its natural place. Broken pieces settling where they belonged. Chloe met Ben during her junior year in Boston. By then, Mark was 27. I was 25. The gap between our lives and his had never felt bigger. Chloe called me a month after they started dating, sounding happier than I'd ever heard her. Said Ben was smart, funny, had a good job lined up after graduation, and actually listened when she talked. A revolutionary concept in our family. I met him the following summer when they drove through Ohio. Ben was one of those guys who didn't need to say much to make a good impression. Confident but not arrogant. Shook my hand firmly, asked about my life, even brought my parents some fancy coffee from Boston as a gift. Mom loved him. Dad did too. Mark didn't. The first time they met, Ben casually asked Mark what he was doing for work. Mark mumbled something vague about taking time to figure things out. Ben just nodded politely and changed the subject. You could tell Mark absolutely hated not being the most impressive person in the room. Someone else was getting attention and respect, and he couldn't stand it. That Christmas, the whole family was together for the first time in over a year: me, Chloe, Ben, Mom, Dad, and, of course, Mark. From the start, Mark was trying way too hard to act like the big man, bragging about his old football glory days, talking over people, cracking dumb jokes that nobody laughed at. Most of the actual conversation was between Chloe, Ben, and me, catching up on real life. You could practically see Mark's irritation building. He hated not being the center of attention. That's when he pulled his classic move. We were all in the living room after dinner. Chloe got up to grab dessert. Mark followed her into the kitchen. A minute later, he came walking back out, holding a huge bowl of water, grinning like an idiot, clearly planning to dump it on her. Before Mark could even move, Ben stepped directly in front of him. Calm voice, steady posture. Put it back. Mark laughed nervously, trying to play it off. It's just for fun. Relax. Ben didn't budge an inch. I said, put it back. Mark froze. He probably realized Ben wasn't like me or Chloe. He wasn't going to shrug it off. He wasn't intimidated. Ben leaned slightly closer. You throw that water, and you and I are going to have a serious problem. Mark stared at him. Then he slowly set the bowl down and walked off without saying another word. Chloe came back into the room, noticed the bowl, gave me a confused look. I just shook my head. Mom immediately tried to smooth it over. Mark was only joking around. Ben didn't even look at her. Doesn't seem very funny to me. The mood shifted hard. Mark stayed quiet the rest of the night. Chloe and Ben left early, claiming travel fatigue. The next day, Mom called me privately to say Ben had overreacted and Mark was just being playful. I told her maybe if she'd bothered to tell Mark to knock it off when we were kids, he wouldn't still be acting like a 12-year-old at 27. She didn't like that response. Over the next year, Chloe visited home less and less, sometimes skipping holidays completely. Mom complained constantly, saying Chloe was too wrapped up in her new boyfriend to care about family. The truth was simpler: she just didn't want to deal with Mark or the endless drama surrounding him. Neither did I. A year after that Christmas incident, Chloe called me with big news. Ben proposed. She sounded excited, but also nervous. I asked what was wrong. She hesitated. I don't want Mark at the wedding. I wasn't surprised. After everything, it made perfect sense. She had every right to want her wedding day to be peaceful. What about Mom and Dad? I asked. She sighed. I'll invite them. But if they try to make this about Mark, they can stay home, too. This is my day, not his. When she told our parents, things went exactly as we expected. Mom said she was completely unfair. Dad said weddings were family events, and Mark absolutely should be there. They argued with her for weeks, called her selfish, accused her of trying to split the family apart. Classic manipulation. Chloe didn't budge. He's not invited. End of story. That's my decision, and it's final. Then the rumors started. Someone heard Mark might show up anyway. One of his friends mentioned he was planning to crash the wedding because nobody tells him where he can or can't go. Of course, he'd make it about himself. He couldn't let his little sister have one day without him being the center of attention. Chloe wasn't scared, but she wasn't taking chances. Ben had 2 college buddies who worked as cops. They volunteered to attend, just in case. That's when I decided to visit Mom and Dad before the ceremony. I was completely done being quiet. Years of favoritism, excuses, and defending Mark's behavior had piled up to the breaking point. This time, they weren't going to talk their way out of it. I drove home 2 weeks before the wedding. Mom had been blowing up my phone about how Chloe was destroying the family. Dad left me a voicemail saying the wedding was a disgrace without Mark. When I walked in, Mom started immediately. She can't seriously expect us to come if Mark's not even invited. I told her that was exactly what Chloe expected, and she had every right to. She's your sister, Mom said, like that was a checkmate argument. You should be talking sense into her. Number one, I said firmly, she doesn't want him there, and she has every right after everything he's done to both of us. End of discussion. Mom looked at me like I'd started speaking another language. That night at dinner, Dad joined the campaign. Your mother's really upset about all this. Chloe needs to reconsider. I set my fork down hard. Why? So Mark can ruin her wedding day like he's ruined every holiday and family gathering for the past 20 years? Dad leaned back, frowning. He's her brother. Yeah, I said, and he spent over 2 decades treating her and me like garbage while you two looked the other way and made excuses for him. That's a fact. Mom told me to watch my tone. I told them maybe they should have watched Mark's behavior 10 years ago when it might have actually made a difference. Then I asked them something that shut the entire table up. What exactly has Mark done with his life? I said. He's in his mid-20s. No job, no education, no plans, lives here rent-free. And you still treat him like he's some kind of gift from heaven. Why? Dad started his usual defense. Mark just needs more time to figure things out. He's had time, I said. All of it handed to him on a silver platter while you blamed everyone else for his screw-ups. And now you expect Chloe to risk her wedding day turning into another one of his disasters? That's not happening. Mom's face went red. Dad told me I was being disrespectful in their own house. Number one, I said, what's actually disrespectful is you two acting like Mark deserves everything and Chloe owes him a place at her wedding after the way he's treated her. She doesn't owe him anything. Nobody said a word for a solid minute. The next day, Mom called Chloe directly for one last attempt. Chloe didn't budge. If you bring him to my wedding, don't bother coming at all. Chloe told her, those are your options. That sent Mom into a full meltdown. She accused Chloe of deliberately humiliating the family. Chloe told her she was done arguing and hung up. Meanwhile, Mark was running his mouth to anyone who would listen, saying he was definitely going to show up anyway. One of his friends told someone that Mark planned to bring a couple of buddies and wasn't going to let his own sister ban him. When I told Chloe, she didn't even sound surprised. Ben's friends will handle it if he tries anything. I'm not letting him ruin this day. 2 days before the wedding, I went back to my parents' house one more time, just to make absolutely clear where I stood. You know, if Mark crashes the wedding, they're calling the police, right? I said bluntly. Mom glared at me. He wouldn't actually do that. He would, I said, because you've spent his entire life letting him believe he can do whatever he wants without consequences. This is what you built. Dad crossed his arms defensively. You think you're better than your brother just because you went to college? No, I said evenly. I think I'm better than him because I don't spend my time making other people's lives miserable for my own entertainment. That's the difference. That's when Dad said something I'll never forget. If your sister keeps this up with Mark, your mother and I might not go to the wedding either. I actually laughed out loud. Then don't. Seriously, go ahead and stay home. You can watch Mark sit in this house for the next 30 years while you keep pretending he's your special little star. Nobody's going to miss you at the wedding if you can't respect Chloe's decision. That's a promise. Dad told me to get out of his house. I said fine. But before I walked out the door, I turned back one last time. You know what the saddest part of all this is? Chloe is marrying a guy who treats her better than her own family ever did. Think about that. Neither of them said a single word as I left. On my way to my car, I saw Mark standing in the driveway, leaning against his vehicle with a smirk. "Big wedding coming up," he said. "Maybe I'll crash it and make a speech." I stopped walking and looked him directly in the eyes. "You show up there, and you'll be leaving with a police escort. Try it if you want to find out." His smirk faded just a little bit. The day before the wedding, Mom texted me saying they still hadn't decided if they were coming. I told her to let me know either way so I could warn Chloe. She didn't respond. That night, Chloe called me. "If they show up with Mark, they're all getting removed. Ben already briefed the venue staff." "You think they'll actually try it?" I asked. She paused. "Honestly, I wouldn't put anything past them at this point." The wedding was Saturday afternoon at this beautiful outdoor venue about an hour from our hometown. Chloe and Ben had intentionally kept everything small and intimate. Close friends, a few relatives who weren't part of the drama. No massive guest list that would be hard to manage. I got there early because Chloe wanted me to keep her updated in real time if anything happened with Mom, Dad, or Mark. Ben's two cop friends were already there, dressed like regular wedding guests, but strategically positioned to watch the entrance. By noon, guests were arriving steadily. No sign of my parents or Mark anywhere. At 1 o'clock, Chloe came out from the bridal suite, looking stressed. Mom texted me. "She's saying they might be running late." "Just her and Dad?" I asked carefully. She shook her head slowly. She didn't specify who. Ben walked over, calm and steady as always. "We've got people watching the entrance. If Mark shows up, he won't even make it past the parking lot." "Don't worry." Chloe nodded, but didn't look entirely convinced. Half an hour before the ceremony, Mom finally texted me directly. "We're not coming. Not without your brother." I showed Chloe the message. She didn't even blink, didn't look upset, just nodded once. "Okay," she said calmly. "Then Grandpa's walking me down the aisle instead." And that was that. No tears, no second-guessing, no last-minute change of heart. She was completely done with all of them. The ceremony started exactly on time. Grandpa walked Chloe down the aisle while Mom and Dad were presumably sitting at home with Mark, convincing themselves they were the real victims. The whole thing was absolutely perfect. Chloe looked genuinely happy. Ben couldn't stop smiling. And everyone actually present was celebrating instead of managing some manufactured crisis for once. But the peace didn't last long. Right after the ceremony, while guests were walking toward the reception tent, one of Ben's cop friends approached me quickly. "Heads up. Mark's car just pulled into the parking lot." Chloe overheard him. "You've got to be kidding me." Ben put his arm around her protectively. "Go enjoy your reception. We'll handle this. Trust me." I followed the cop to the parking lot. Mark was climbing out of his car with two of his buddies. None of them were even dressed for a wedding. Mark was in jeans and a wrinkled t-shirt, like he was showing up to a backyard barbecue. "Turn around," the cop said firmly before Mark even finished shutting his car door. "You're not welcome here." Mark smirked. "I'm here for my sister's wedding." "You're not invited," the cop said. "Leave now." Mark looked past him directly at me. "You're really going to let them do this to your own brother?" I stared right back at him. "You've had months to actually get invited by being a decent person. You chose not to. Take the hint." One of Mark's buddies muttered something about family is family. The cop held up his hand firmly. "You take one step past this parking lot, you're trespassing on private property. That's your choice to make." Mark glared at me with pure hatred. "This is all because of you. You turned everyone against me." I actually laughed. She's been done with you for years, Mark. You were just too self-absorbed to notice. For a second, I genuinely thought he was going to try something stupid. But then Ben walked up beside me. He wasn't yelling. Didn't need to. His presence alone changed the energy completely. You need to leave, Ben said, voice calm but absolutely firm. Right now. If you step past this parking lot, you're trespassing, and security will make sure you're escorted out in a way you won't enjoy. Mark's smirk finally cracked. He looked at his two buddies, probably realizing neither of them actually wanted to spend the night getting arrested over his tantrum. This isn't over, he muttered as he got back in his car. Yeah, I said, it really is, though. They drove off. Back at the reception, nobody even mentioned the parking lot incident to Chloe. She danced, laughed, took pictures, enjoyed her wedding day, exactly like she deserved. Ben kept a watchful eye on things, but Mark never came back. Later that night, when things were winding down, Mom finally texted Chloe again. We can't believe you would embarrass the family like this on your wedding day. Chloe didn't even bother responding. She just handed me her phone. You deal with them. I'm done. I texted back from her phone. She didn't embarrass anyone. You embarrassed yourselves by choosing Mark over your daughter for 20 years straight. Don't contact her tonight. She's celebrating. Mom didn't respond after that. After the wedding, a few of us stayed behind to help clean up. Chloe hugged me tight before leaving for her honeymoon. Thanks for having my back through all of this, she said. Always, I told her. That's what family is actually supposed to do. On the drive home, I kept waiting for my phone to blow up with angry calls from Mom or Dad. Nothing came through until the next morning. Dad's voicemail was furious. Said I turned my sister against the family. I deleted it without calling back. 2 days after the wedding, Mom sent a long text demanding an apology for excluding Mark. I didn't reply. Chloe didn't either. A week later, Dad left another angry voicemail. Same script he'd been running for years. I deleted that one, too. Chloe blocked both of them. Mark tried calling me once, left a rambling message saying I was jealous of him. Jealous of what? He didn't say. By fall, Mark had started some pyramid scheme selling overpriced energy drinks. Told everyone he'd be rich in 6 months. That lasted 3 weeks before he quit. Then he tried selling car detailing services out of the garage. That lasted 2 weeks. Then he got into cryptocurrency and lost what little money he had. Mom and Dad bailed him out again. Meanwhile, Chloe and Ben bought a house in upstate Virginia. She got promoted to senior analyst. They threw a housewarming party. I drove up with Sarah and spent the whole weekend there. Ben's parents came, too. Good food, good people, no drama. That Christmas, Chloe hosted dinner at her new place. She invited me, Sarah, a few cousins, Ben's family, and Grandpa. She didn't invite Mom, Dad, or Mark. Christmas morning, Mom sent a group text saying the family used to be close before certain people got involved. Nobody responded. 2 months later, Mark wrecked Dad's truck. Borrowed it without asking, took it joyriding, and wrapped it around a telephone pole. He walked away fine, but the truck was totaled. Insurance didn't cover everything. Dad paid $4,000 out of pocket. That spring, Mark got fired from a warehouse job for showing up late 3 times. Then he got fired from a restaurant for arguing with a manager. Then he quit a landscaping gig because the hours were too early. Dad got sick that summer. Nothing life-threatening, but bad enough that he couldn't work for 3 months. Mom called me asking for help with bills. I asked if Mark had gotten a job yet. She hesitated. He's trying. I told her I hoped Dad recovered, but I wasn't moving back and I wasn't sending money. She hung up on me. The following spring, Chloe had her first baby, a boy named James. Mom and Dad still hadn't met him. Chloe told them they could visit if they apologized for the wedding and admitted they'd been wrong about Mark for years. They refused. Said they wouldn't be blackmailed. So Ben's parents became the only grandparents James would know. They drove up from Pennsylvania every month, brought toys, helped with babysitting, took a million pictures. Meanwhile, Mom and Dad sat at home with Mark and missed everything. Last fall, Mark got arrested. Reckless driving. He ran a red light doing 50 in a 30 zone and T-boned another car. Nobody was seriously injured, but the other driver's car was totaled. Mark spent the night in jail. Mom and Dad paid his bail, his lawyer paid the settlement to avoid a lawsuit. His license got suspended for a year. A month after that, Mom called me, said they were rewriting their will, hinted they were leaving everything to Mark because he needs it most. I told her that was fine. She sounded surprised. You don't care? No, I said, because he'll burn through it in a year and end up right back where he started. She didn't have a response. 2 weeks ago, Chloe called me, said Mark had been posting on social media about how his siblings abandoned him, how we turned our backs on family, how we thought we were better than everyone. One of his posts said he was going to show up at Chloe's house and demand to see his nephew. Ben handled it. He called Mark directly and told him if he stepped foot on their property, he'd be arrested for trespassing. Mark called him a bunch of names and hung up. He never showed. Last weekend, I drove up to see Chloe and the baby. We had dinner, watched a movie, played with James on the living room floor. Ben's parents came over for brunch on Sunday. Sarah and I stayed in their guest room. On the drive home, Chloe texted me a photo of James taking his first steps, holding onto the coffee table, grinning at the camera. Mom and Dad have never seen that kid in person. Never held him. Never watched him crawl or heard him laugh. They're missing all of it because they couldn't let go of Mark for 5 minutes. My cousin told me last week that Mark's still living at home, still unemployed, still gaming all night in the basement, still waiting for something to magically change without him doing anything different. Meanwhile, I just got promoted at work. Chloe is up for another raise. We're planning a trip this summer, her and Ben and James, me and Sarah, renting a cabin somewhere quiet. No drama, no phone calls from parents trying to guilt us. Just family that actually acts like family. Mom texted me yesterday asking if we could talk soon. I left her on read. Some things don't need a response. What does it take for some people to finally open their eyes to the real cost of their choices?